Okay, just a little bit about Campaign for Liberty. We're continuing to grow. We're closing on 600,000 members nationwide. We're having an impact on both the state and federal level. I think probably a lot of you followed the vote earlier this week on the Patriot Act, where either John Boehner doesn't know how to count, or we really took him by surprise. I like to think the second. Just a note on that, I think Doug's going to talk a little bit about that, but looks like the Patriot Act will be coming up again tonight, and they only need a majority to pass it this time. So any of you that have a few minutes, call your representatives. I can tell you word we get is Boehner and the leadership are really putting pressure on those Republican freshmen who voted against the Patriot Act. So they're getting a lot of pressure from the leadership, and anything we can do to counter that would be very helpful. We've also put together a list, and I don't have it with me, I think someone here might, 13, I think they're all Republican members of Congress, who last year in their candidate survey pledged to oppose the Patriot Act and then voted for it on Tuesday. We're running a little special effort in their districts with emails, press releases, media interviews, taking them to task for that. And of course, our number one priority for the year will continue to be Audit the Fed, introduced by Ron Paul in the House and Senator Rand Paul in the Senate, and we're going to be pushing that hard through the year. And what you can do on that is we're going to do the same thing we did last year. We want to build up the co-sponsors in both the House and the Senate. Contact your congressman, your senator, urge them to co-sponsor the bill, and then we're going to try to get it to a vote in both houses. The way this is going to work, we have 3 panelists who will be talking about some legislative issues, and I think what we're going to do is I'll have each of them speak, and then if there's time at the end, we'll open it up to a few questions on the issues they talk about. We are a little crunched for time since Tom Woods will be in this room at 2 o'clock, so we've got to get out of here and let them set up. So anyway, first up will be Doug Stafford, who's Chief of Staff for Senator Rand Paul. Doug is, he doesn't deserve the applause. Doug is one of my oldest friends in politics. We worked together for many years at National Right to Work Committee. Doug was one of the architects of Rand's both primary victory and general election victory. I think Doug's here to talk about why the Jets couldn't make it to the Super Bowl this year. Now, Doug's going to discuss the Balanced Budget Amendment, Patriot Act, and pretty much anything else legislatively from the Senate side. So, Doug Stafford.
I'm getting grief from a Raiders fan here. Come on. Thank you all. As John mentioned, I am honored to work with Senator Rand Paul now as his Chief of Staff, and as you may have seen, he came out with a rather ambitious agenda right away. You probably have heard some of the stories on the other side saying, you know, aren't you supposed to sit down and be quiet for a while? And I think they had a good answer to that from our office the other day, which is, if you came here to do something, why waste time keeping your promises? And somebody in Kentucky, a good friend of ours who's a prominent blogger and runs a nice blog in Kentucky, wrote, Rand Paul shouldn't be getting all this attention. That was his headline. And it was interesting because at first I thought he was backhanding us, but what turns out what he was doing was saying the guy ran on specific points, he ran on principle, and then he got here and he started fulfilling his promises from day one. That should be what they all do. That's why he should be getting attention. Senator Paul obviously learned well from his father about what principle means and what it means to keep your promises and be, probably no one in this room will have to wonder about where Senator Paul is going to stand on an issue because he's already told you and he's going to stay there. And I think it's important, and I think we don't have enough of it. So I'm honored to work for him and help him in that capacity. Some of the particulars that we're working on right now, you've probably seen some of the budget cuts he's proposed, while some on the other body on the other side of Capitol Hill are tinkering around with $30 billion cuts. Rand has proposed fully articulated, itemized legislation to cut $500 billion in 1 year from the budget. calculator. It's not that hard. And not to belittle it, but as Senator Paul has said himself, even that's considered bold. It's considered almost extreme by a lot of people in this town. It doesn't even cut a third of the deficit next year. We're not done, by the way. In the next couple of weeks, he will introduce a fully balanced budget. That one we needed to happen. So, if they thought the $500 million was hard, it's going to be interesting in a few weeks. But you can't spend the time bothering with $20 and $30 billion cuts. It gets you nowhere. It's not going to be anywhere getting us out of the fiscal mess where you're in. President Obama in his State of the Union said he would have a freeze at 2010 levels. And Senator DeMint had a great quote about that. It said, if the car is heading toward the cliff at 80 miles an hour, you don't put on the cruise control. It doesn't make any sense. So, freezing it even at 2008 levels doesn't help. If you are freezing at 2010 levels like President Obama wants, you add $3.8 trillion to our debt, to our national debt in the next 5 years. If you freeze it at 2008 levels and do what the House Republicans have advocated, you still add $3 trillion. That's what we're arguing about right now, and it's the wrong debate. We need to be arguing about how not to add to our national debt. The other thing that is important is to force them to balance the budget by law. That's why Senator Paul was happy to pledge and to co-sponsor a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. And it's important to know which one he co-sponsored as well. Senator Lee and Senator Paul put in their own version, which includes a supermajority for any tax increases and does not have the typical exception in it for military conflict. So one thing that almost every version of the balanced budget has had over the years is if you're in anything termed a military conflict, they can waive the act with a simple majority. That's meaningless. Think of the last 10 years. They wouldn't have had to have enforced it over the last 10 years. It's meaningless, and Senator Paul and Senator Lee's version does not include that provision. So you cannot, as Senator Coburn has said, you can't fight a war on a charge card. We don't think you should be fighting one anyway, but if you're going to, you certainly better pay for it. So. So it's important to contact congressmen and senators over that, because that is going to come up. That's going to be a fight this year. And I think it actually has a real shot, but it's going to take a lot of pressure. The next fight is one that, while we've been joined by a good number of people in their desire to cut the budget, a greater number in their desire to put it into the Constitution, we're not joined by a whole lot of people on this next fight. You may have seen yesterday Rand Paul announced his opposition to the renewal of the Patriot Act. Once again, this shouldn't be a surprise. He said it during the campaign, and I guess sometimes people are surprised when you mean it, but he did. He announced his opposition yesterday. If you haven't seen it, he did a great video that's on our website, our Senate website. It's probably on our Facebook page and all over now, about why he's opposing it. And it's pretty simple, really. The government does not get to take away your liberty just to give you the sense of security that it thinks it's giving you. You can't protect the First and the Second Amendment without protecting the Fourth. It's something that we're working real hard to try to explain to Republicans and conservatives, because we don't believe this is an issue that should be a lone voice on the Republican side. If you are a gun owner, if you believe in the Second Amendment, it is difficult to give the government this kind of power and to take away Fourth Amendment rights and believe your Second Amendment rights are going to remain protected, which is why Gun Owners of America opposes the Patriot Act as well. The final vote on the House, it looks like it'll be tonight. I don't know exactly when the Senate's going to be taking it up, but please call your senators. The Republicans in the Senate need to hear from you about why conservatives and Republicans and libertarians all can get behind the fact that it's difficult to be a small government conservative when you give the government the power that is in the Patriot Act. You have to, if you're for small government, you have to be for small government across the board, in our opinion. So, kind of looking forward to that night. It's going to be interesting because I don't believe he'll have a whole lot of company on the Senate side, but that's okay. Sometimes you have to stand up and say what's right, whether or not you're by yourself, and that's what he's going to do. Senator Paul is the main and original sponsor of the Audit the Fed bill in the Senate. He's proud and happy to do that, and we look forward to that fight in the next few months. Congressman Paul has started the ball rolling already in the House, and Senator Paul will do so in the Senate. And as you know, no matter how many co-sponsors we get, they're going to try their tricks to not get it through. They've already tried one in the House by putting it in the wrong committee. So the Senate, they don't get to do that. Senator Paul can just bring it down to the floor and do it himself if he has to. It's one of the things we talked about in the campaign is the liberty movement and the conservative movement have not had enough people who are willing to just go down and stand up and say stop in the Senate. And it's important because one person can do a lot. And I hope we'll see that over the next few months. He's already helping to drive the debate. And the fact that somebody is out there saying you're not cutting enough is important. That's what moves the ball in our direction. I think that you'll see him continue to do that, but he needs everybody's support, especially on the Patriot Act fight in the next few weeks. This is something that is going to be enormously, the pressure is on from the other side already. They put on the full court press when you announce something like this. So anything everybody here can do to pass the word around, watch his video, pass it around to everybody you know, and we would certainly appreciate that. As John mentioned, he's speaking at 3:45 today in the main ballroom, so I'd encourage everybody to attend. I also echo the sentiment to please vote in the straw poll and possibly to vote for somebody related to Rankin.